Hello, everyone. It is Sinéad Whelehan, and we are back for Barbara School number 9. This is Barbara and I's, that was grammatically incorrect, but anyway, it is our first connection after some weeks, and so we've both been really looking forward to this. Barbara's going to be talking about synchronicities that she's had and how impactful they have been on her path and her career and many other aspects of her life, including, of course, her conscious development. So, Barbara, how are you? It's so lovely to see you again.
Thank you. I'm just fine and very happy to be doing this again
Yes, yeah, we always have a good time.
with you.
Oh,
Right.
I'm happy to be with you as well. I'm happy to be with you as well. And I'm definitely always game to hear your stories and all the experiences that you've had because you've led such an incredible life. And actually, the comments on YouTube that have been coming in since the first 8 episodes we recorded have been talking about that. People are thrilled to be learning more about you and your life and how things have unfolded for you. So that just makes me extra excited. I'm looking forward to learning more.
Oh, that's very nice. Appreciate that response that people have. So we're talking about synchronicities today. And every once in a while I'm with somebody. It might be a client, it might be a friend, and they would say, tell about something that had happened, and they'd say, and then it was the most amazing synchronicity that such and such happened. And I began to kind of look back on my own life and realize, oh my goodness, I've had a whole bunch of synchronicities that stand out enough to actually remember them and be thankful for them. So synchronicities are a curious thing. It's like when something is of importance to you, you may be thinking it, you might be doing it, and then very shortly thereafter, there's something else that occurs that really relates to what that was
Mm-hmm.
you were thinking or doing. I mean, as if magic.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder about that. I'm thinking about the overall consciousness that there is in existence, consciousness even in the whole universe,
Mm-hmm.
as well as in our world, our part of the universe. And I think that there is a unifying consciousness that kicks in and responds consciously to us when we're either doing something that is meaningful to us, important to us, or maybe not even particularly important, but we're doing or thinking or saying something,
Mm-hmm.
at least at the moment, has interest and importance, sometimes a lot of importance. And then suddenly it's as if the universe responds to that by giving us something else that relates to that or validates whatever that is we were thinking or doing or wondering about. So I just look back and I think that there's a whole bunch of things of that sort that have happened to me, like probably to most of you. I bet you've had your share of synchronicities as well. And it's just a curious thing. I think it's actually quite a wonderful thing. So I'm going to give you some examples of that now that have happened in my life. I'm
Sure.
going to start with being a senior in high school.
Uh-huh.
Actually, I had graduated from high school, and it was about a month before beginning college. I had registered for a college and I had turned down um, an invitation to become a member of the student class at Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts. But I
Mm-hmm.
had signed up for another another college and had turned down my acceptance at Mount Holyoke. But one afternoon in the hammock in my parents' backyard, I was just sort of, swinging along, thinking, looking up at the sky. And suddenly it came to me, you know what? I've made the wrong choice about the college that I'm just about to go to. I don't think I should be going to that school. I think I should be going to Mount Holyoke College.
Oh,
And I didn't have a rational reason for that. I just had that sense of knowing it. So I went in the house and told my parents that I was going to back out of the college that I was supposedly going to and see if I could get readmitted or re-invited to be a student at Mount Holyoke College. And my parents didn't think there was a chance at all. my father laughed. He said, "Oh, you're nuts. They're not going to accept you after you've turned them down. They've filled it in with another student by now." And but anyway, I persisted, and they said, "Well, you're going to have to do this. Then we'll drive you up there." It was about a 5-hour drive from where we lived, but you have to make the call, and you have to make the appointment, and you have to talk your way in to
wow.
being a student there. So I did that, and then as it happened, after the admissions officer said, "All right, we're adding an extra place, an extra student to your class. And you will be the 321st student, whereas we were planning to have 320. And then my father said, "Do you by any chance have all the old records about the founding of the college and who helped with that?" And she said, "Yes." So she went into another room and brought up big leather covered tomes and, sort of yellowing pages. And he said, "Well, look up my great grandmother who in 1847 helped the founder of this college to do the founding of the college." So she looked up that his great grandmother, who is my great great grandmother, and there was the record of her being in that first graduating class of Mount Holyoke College, and helped to found the college. Now, my father had never, ever mentioned that to me in all the years that I was thinking about which college I would want to go to.
Wow.
And he said, "Well, I've always believed that people should go to the college that they gravitate toward on their own." And I had gravitated toward that college without realizing that my own great great grandmother had been one of the founders of
Wow.
that college. So that was really exciting.
Yes.
Jump ahead to 1968 when I had just moved to California from Connecticut. And sitting one night, reading a magazine, all alone, kids were in bed, husband was away, and I had a spirit visitation from my favorite aunt, Peg. I've told her about this in another one of our talks.
Yes, you have.
And the thing about that is that even though I never talked about that for 6 years, until one day, one Saturday morning, I was somehow, for some reason, unbeknownst to me, I was thinking about that spirit visitation from my Aunt Peg. And I was also, while doing that, was just sort of looking through the local paper while I was eating breakfast. And there was a notice of a seminar that was going to happen about 3 hours later that afternoon, right 4 blocks from my house, a seminar on the naturalness of the supernatural, which enabled me to go and talk about that experience that I have been wondering about for 6 years of that spirit visitation. How absolutely wonderful.
Yes.
Also in 1968 or 9, by that time I had discovered the joy of moving to music. And I was teaching music classes and a couple of mornings every week. And the classes seemed to be so helpful, so therapeutic for the people who joined my classes. More than just enjoyment, it really seemed to be a therapy, and that's what attracted me to it. So after doing this for a little while, thinking, this is really a therapy. What a surprise. But I like it. But anyway, one morning, the telephone rang, and it was a woman whom I had never heard of before or even since then. Just a nice woman's voice on the phone saying, somebody told me to call you and tell you that a dance therapist is going to be teaching a course right in your own town, Claremont, California, right at the Claremont colleges. And she is open for students joining that dance therapy class. And I thought, well, this is amazing. I was just thinking about using dance as a therapy. So I called and found out about the class, joined it, took her classes for several years, and then through her heard about many other dance therapy classes and the American Dance Therapy Association, and became very, very aware of all that, very participating in that national organization. All because this woman out of the blue called me when I was wondering about using movement and dance as a therapy
Wow.
rather than as an entertainment.
That is so funny. You know what, Barbara? That actually reminds me a little bit of your big voice that you've talked about in a previous recording we did together also in this Barbara School series. You were talking about that big voice that says basically do this, right? And you really hear it. So it's almost like this is another way that the big voice comes into your life, is through these very clear directions.
Yeah, there was somebody else's big voice, and I have no idea who that woman was.
Oh my goodness, that's
she
so
opened up a whole world for me by that telephone call. So then there I was in the late 1960s and early 1970s doing dance therapy work. And also, I was doing a lot of counseling work, had 2 weekends of training in counseling skills. And people were asking to come to me for counseling sessions. And I thought, I really ought to be licensed. I ought to get a master's degree and go through the licensing procedure. So I was just thinking about that one week in particular. And then suddenly, in a phone conversation with a friend, the friend said, oh, by the way, do you know that there's a new course at the University of Laverne, which was 15 minutes away only from where I am? uh, there's a new course being offered, a master's degree, so that you can get the master's degree and then go through the licensing procedure and become a licensed marriage and family therapist. I said, that's just what I was thinking about. I wondered how I could do that, but I assumed that all the schools were too far away. And that, I mean, I'm raising my 3 kids and I'm in a marriage. I just can't handle going away very far. But this is 15 minutes away. And my friend said, they're just about to close their enrollment. So if you're interested, call right now, which I did. And I was the last one to join.
Oh
and
my
join that
goodness.
program. And thank goodness that did, because that enabled me to get my master's degree and then study for the license exam and become a licensed marriage and family therapist, which I have done all of these years. So, and this has enabled so much of the work that I have done, even though I've taken it into some somewhat different directions uh, beyond basic therapy, which I did all of those years anyway. So then later on in the 1970s, about 1977 or so, I discovered by another synchronicity, I discovered Raymond Moody's book, Dr. Raymond Moody, called Life After Life. He
Mhm.
was one of the earliest people who wrote about people's real near death experiences. And I was really fascinated with that book. I thought this is so wonderful, so hopeful, encouraging us to really know that there's proof that we do exist consciously after physically dying. And those people were giving wonderful, wonderful stories of going into the next realm. Anyway, I was very, very inspired by that and thinking, I really want to know more and more about this. Well, then it came to my attention from another synchronicity, another friend just happening to mention it, that Raymond Moody was giving a lecture at a college about an hour away from where I was. So I was able to go to the lecture and meet Dr. Raymond Moody and learn more and become even more inspired. That was absolutely great.
Barbara, this is so funny. Your synchronicities really like to make life very convenient for you in terms of traffic and driving to and fro. Like 15 minutes, 1 hour. It's never a plane ride. It's never,
Yeah.
country. It's around the corner. It's right there,
And there was more of that too. Yeah. So, anyway, in 1976, unfortunately, my marriage was severely threatened, and I was having a miserable, miserable time. I felt like I was going through the dark night of the soul, and I realized that I needed rescuing from the terrible, terrible feelings I was having. I was talking to friends who were therapists, and I was already a licensed therapist myself by that time. But I was just miserable, having a terrible time. And the thought kept going through my mind, I need a life ring. I need a life ring for my feelings. So, in the midst of this terrible time, I went down to University of California at San Diego and went to a weekend seminar, a workshop. And at that workshop, I met a man who seemed to be about my age, and he became a fantastic friend. And he was really attuned to me and what was going on for me. And I realized I kept thinking in that friendship that he was my life ring. Just thank you, God. He was my life ring that came along to help me through that time. And of course, I did get through that time and have had incredibly wonderful years since then. Uh, so then, in the early 1980s, having had a number of spontaneous past life recalls
Yes.
that
Yeah.
I've spoken about in our series too, um, then I was really for a while wondering how past lives and knowing about past lives could be used therapeutically, which is one of those ongoing thoughts. And in the meantime, there was a friend who kept inviting me to come over to her house for a Thursday night meditation session. And I was thinking, no, I don't want to go. I just want to really try to figure out about how knowing about our past lives can be used therapeutically. But one of those Thursday nights I gave in and I went to that meditation class. And there I met wonderful Hazel Denning, who had founded the Association for Past Life Research and Therapies. And she told me about the conference they were having the next night with past life therapists from all over the country convening. And the conference would go on all weekend. So I went thinking I'd just be there for the Friday night just to get a look, a taste of what these past life therapists were doing. And before that moment, I had never even heard of past life regression therapists or past life regression.
Oh my goodness.
Even though I had had some spontaneous regressions to some of my own past lives before that, but I didn't know it was a respected discipline. So I went to the conference, was so impressed, and stayed the whole weekend, and then took 5 years of training in past life regression therapy. All of that because of that wonderful synchronicity of going that one time to that meditation group.
Yes.
And that was the one time that Hazel Denning went there as well.
What are the chances? And actually, Barbara, just a question. You said that you did 5 years of training. Was that with Hazel?
Well, it was with Hazel's organization.
Okay.
She had other therapists who were actually doing the training, and they had had years of experience in doing past life regression therapy. So Hazel was organizing the whole group, and she was kind of the overall mentor, but not the specific trainer. And then after several years of doing past life regression therapy and gradually beginning to learn that there was such a thing as people who experienced extraterrestrial beings coming and having encounters, and the beings would often take them away. And so I wondered if I could work with that since I was already doing regression therapy. So it was one distinct day in the shower, this was 1991, when I happened to be thinking, if anybody would ever come to me, who'd had experiences with these unusual beings from somewhere else in space, and if they had been taken away by them or interacted with them in some way and wanted to know more about that, I think I could handle that. Yeah, I could do that because I've been doing so much regression therapy by now anyway in my regular therapy practice. And so, yeah, I could handle that. And then 2 hours later, I had my first referral for that, a young woman, and who was terrified because of her extraterrestrial visitors in her room at night. And I worked very successfully with that, really helped her tremendously. And so then I thought, that's great. I can, if anybody else comes, I can work with that. And now it's been a few thousand people who've come since then for that particular kind of work.
Oh my goodness, 2 hours later, Barbara, that is bonkers. And also, I remember you telling me, I think this might have been just during one of our recordings, how you didn't really have to do anything. All of these people who had had these kinds of experiences just suddenly started flooding into your practice.
Yes. And that must be absolutely full of synchronicities.
For sure.
I don't remember specifically of how they all happened, but I just know that once I had worked with that first young woman about extraterrestrial encounters, then it just, from my point of view, it just happened. Amazing. Without my particularly talking about it to anyone that I can remember. I just started getting phone calls and referrals from people, referrals for people who'd had these unusual visitations and wanted to know a lot more about it. In many cases, they were quite baffled and disturbed about it. So that's how it all began, that I've been doing thousands of regressions now to people's extraterrestrial encounters, even as recently as yesterday. And they continue. So now another type of thing, this is more of a fun nature. I had 2 trips to Easter Island, which is my favorite place in the world, having been to many, many countries. And on my second trip, I took my daughter, and we had 2 other friends with us. And one day, my daughter and I were walking on the inside of the volcano on Easter Island, the volcano from which all those big monumental statues, the Moai statues, had been carved and removed and stood up on various places in the island. So we were walking along on the inside of the extinct volcano. And my daughter said, how is it that you ever discovered to come to Easter Island, Mom? And I said, well, back in 1992, I think it was, I went on a trip to a deep canyon like the Grand Canyon, but it's down in the Baja California Peninsula. And I went with a group, a UCLA extension group, which was led by Joanne Van Tilburg, an archaeologist. And Joanne Van Tilburg, very often in the evenings, when we were sitting around a campfire at the bottom of the canyon, she was telling us about Easter Island. And of course, I had seen pictures of the statues on Easter Island, like most of us have, but I hadn't thought too much about it. But she got me really inspired and interested. So a couple of decades later, I actually did go to Easter Island. Okay, so I was telling my daughter about this, and we could see on the other side of the volcano, there was some excavating going on. It looked like they were excavating one of the huge Moai statues.
Oh, wow.
And we decided to walk over and see what they were doing. So we went there, and they had dug deeply down, about 20 feet down from the surface, and you could see the bottom of this big statue, and they hadn't even gotten to the bottom of it yet, even though they were about 20 feet down. But on the upside of this excavation, there was a woman with a sun hat and sunglasses, and she seemed to be looking at some papers on a set up card table. And I just went over, said hello, just being friendly, like to a fellow tourist, I thought. And that woman looked at me and said, what brings you to Easter Island? And I said, well, back in about 1992, I went on a UCLA trip to a deep canyon in the Baja Peninsula. And this wonderful leader of our group kept talking about Easter Island. So at that point, she took off her sunglasses and her sun hat so I could see her whole face. She said, well, I am Joanne Van Tilburg. That was me. And she said, I'm so glad that the talks that I gave inspired you to come to Easter Island. I said, I'm so inspired that I even came here last year, and I would be happy to come again. So that was a fun synchronicity.
Oh my gosh.
Now here's another one that I think is just delicious. In 1989, I had one of my past life therapy colleagues do a regression on me, knowing the subject was knowing the main purpose why my second husband, Warren, um, what was the main purpose of our being together in this lifetime, because
Oh.
it seemed like it was a wonderful purpose, a wonderful relationship, and and just so unlikely that we would have met, because he was English and living in England and working all over the world, and just so incredibly unlikely that I would happen to meet him and get connected with him and marry him. So, anyway, we had a regression in 1989, and that regression took me back to a lifetime with him as a different person, a different name, in England at the end of the 1800s and early 1900s. It was a very meaningful regression and a very detailed one. I got lots and lots of detail about the beautiful home in England that we had lived in.
Mm-hmm.
And then we skip ahead to 1996, a few years later, and I was in England for one of my crop circle investigations, and I was in a crop circle, and I kept being attracted to looking back and seeing that particular house. We were in the middle of a field in a crop circle, and at the edge of the field, there was a whole grove of trees, and behind that was a brick house standing up above the trees. The top floor was above the trees. And I kept being attracted to that, and suddenly realized, oh, that's the house that I lived in with Warren in that past life. And later on, a couple of days later, friends actually drove me around to see the house. And every detail that I remembered about that house and that property were there. So I'm sure that really was the house.
Oh my goodness. I remember you telling me that story, I think
Yeah.
last year. That blew my mind. It still does. Amazing.
Right. Oh, I know. And then another really fun was somewhere around the mid 2000s, I think, the first 10 years of the 2000s, I was invited to go to a party up on a mountain in Malibu, California. And Malibu is right on the Pacific Ocean. But this was a big mountain there, and um, people were having a birthday party for a well-known disc jockey named Skrillex.
Oh,
I,
yes. I've heard of
I, I had not heard of Skrillex before, but thought, what a cute name. Anyway, his friends were gathering and giving him a big party. I think it was maybe he was turning 30, or, one of those ages when you pay special attention. And so, anyway, a driver came and picked me up in Claremont. We drove about an hour and a half uh, to the coast and up on that mountain. And they had it so that everybody who arrived at the party, and there probably were at least 100 of us, that we were given a mask that looked like an extraterrestrial, gray extraterrestrial, and then a suit to put on. It had a white hood and like a white coverall suit. So
Okay.
in other words, we were looking like white aliens. And and we all stood around in a circle up on one knoll up there near the top of the mountain, and stood there waiting for a van to come along with the birthday man,
Uh-huh.
getting out. He came out, and he was blindfolded, and they finally they brought him up this knoll and took off the blindfold. There we were, this big 100 people standing around looking like white aliens
Oh my goodness.
of varying heights, of course. And and then they had a big statue in the middle of the circle with a blanket over it. And they took off the blanket, and it was a big life-size model of a gray alien,
Oh my
which they were giving to him. So after that, anyway, that's just setting the context for this unusual group of people,
God. That sounds
the
like fun.
unusual birthday party. Then we all moved over to a different part of the territory there near the top of the mountain, and they had uh, chairs all set up like you would for an outdoor wedding, but this was for an outdoor lecture. They had a platform and they had me get up and give a lecture about UFOs and extraterrestrial experiences.
My
And
goodness.
they had a microphone so everybody could hear. And so I was starting the talk by saying, maybe some of you have some interest in UFOs, maybe some of you don't, but it does happen many times that people look up to the sky and see a UFO. So I was gesturing like this and pointing up to the sky. And there, right then, there was a UFO flying by.
I mean, of course there was.
That's a spectacular synchronicity.
That is bananas. Did you
I
point
know.
it out? Did you say, look, there's one right there? Or what?
Yeah, right where I was pointing. And I said, oh my God, there's one right there. And so everybody looked and they all laughed and thought, wow, she
My,
knows what she's talking about.
my
Oh
goodness.
my goodness, that was just fantastic. Oh, and then another does sometimes it's sort of a little thing that happens, but makes a difference. I was one of these, about 3 years ago, I was wanting to go to the conference called Contact in the Desert,
Uh-huh.
which is out in the Palm Springs area. And I had been to that conference when it had been at a more rural destination, but this time it was going to be in a really fancy hotel. And I just had not gotten around to trying to find somebody to drive over with and to share a room with and accompany me too. So I was thinking about this, and then I was at one of the San Diego MUFON meetings, and somebody mentioned Contact in the Desert, and I said, "Yeah, I've been really wanting to go to that. I just haven't got that organized yet." And just right then, there was a lady who heard that conversation and said, I want to go to Contact in the Desert. Why don't we go together? So we did. We did it that year and the next year as well, which worked out very nicely for both of us. Then just recently, a couple of months ago, having thought for a few years really that I really need an assistant to go through my emails and pull out the ones that are important that have to do with people wanting regressions, and that they had found me through the website, and they could type a message in the website and it would go right over to my emails. But I was getting really, really terribly behind. I mean, I had about 300 emails of that type unanswered. And I thought, there's no way. As I continue to do these regressions, which take 3 or 4 hours or sometimes more
Yeah.
for each one, there's no way I'm ever going to catch up. So I was particularly thinking one day, thinking, how am I going to find somebody? I just am not sure how to go about this. I've got to ask one of my grown kids for advice how to find an assistant, maybe through one of the universities or colleges around here. But that afternoon, a young man came for a regression and his mother came with him. She was very interested in that whole process. And they mentioned his sister, her daughter, who is a young woman who really likes to help people. And they said, "Do you need any help
Oh
by any
my
chance?"
God.
Yes, yes, I do. Does your daughter have computer skills?
Oh
And does she know
goodness.
how to fix computers when they go awry? And they said, "Oh, yes, she's a great typist and she very high tech person. And we'll tell her about you."
Oh
So
my.
they did, and she has become my assistant, which has been a tremendous help in getting some of my office work done. So I really appreciate that very much.
I can't get over the time frames, Barbara. Like you keep saying, and then 2 hours later, or that day, or 5 minutes later, or
Yeah, or
that
one bit
afternoon.
later, like with the MUFON group and the conference, just less than a minute.
Yeah,
I said,
unbelievable.
I would like to find somebody to go with. And she turned her head around and said, "I'm wanting to go."
She was literally over your shoulder. That is
Yeah,
astounding.
she was just sort of sitting next to me.
Oh my goodness.
And when I was talking to somebody else in front of me, and so it was just a matter of her turning her head and my turning my head, and there it was.
Oh wow.
And she
You
had been wanting to find somebody to go
Yeah,
with.
yeah, it was a synchronicity for her too, no doubt. I mean,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
you either have absolutely astronomical skills of manifestation or a tremendous amount of support or both. Because what an invisible team you have if they're just like, okay, we'll just wait. We'll just wait for the next thing she wants. Okay, she asked for it. Okay, guys, how fast can we make it happen? Let's get it down to 2 minutes and 25 seconds, you know?
Oh, that's really cute. I don't know, but I do think that we all have plenty of synchronicities that go on, and it's really meaningful. I think if you take a look into your own life and kind of keep track of some of those, you can realize, wow, whatever it is, whatever this connecting link is, and I do think there is one in consciousness, um, hmm, it kind of opens up our point of view. So I think that some of the people that we know about, like Dr. Stephen Greer being one of the more notable ones, they talk about unlimited consciousness, and others talk about the whole universe being conscious.
Mm,
And the hybrid people, ET human hybrid people whom I know, talk about how we are all one
mm,
and like one huge being and one enormous consciousness. So I think that there are so many more connections going on that we don't even have awareness of, don't even know how to talk about it. But I think there are just too many of these things like synchronicities that happen to think it's just sheer chance or luck, as some people might say. No, I think when we really have feeling about something rather than just a casual thought, when we really have feeling about something, that's when the synchronicities tend to happen,
mm.
even if it's a delayed reaction of a few years.
Do you think that's So do you think that's because, the feeling acts as a kind of magnet? I'm thinking about how energy works, and phrases that we live by, like whatever you focus on, you make more of it. So that idea about, whatever we cultivate in ourselves or whatever our mindset is, we draw more of that towards us. Do you think it works like that?
Yeah, yes. Yes, I think so. So what is that draws
Mm,
that to us? I think we can wonder about that, but then again, I think it shows that we are connected with so much more than we have any inkling of.
I completely agree. I completely
Yeah.
completely agree. Yeah. I mean, it's one of the things that I think is hard to undo as a human, this compulsion that we seem to have to know things and to define them and have them very clear and very organized, when the
Right.
fact is that life is largely a huge mystery. The universe is largely a huge mystery. So,
Right.
so is all of this. It's
Yeah.
like an adventure that we have to make our way through with our, with our wits about us and a good set of tools and, a good band of merry men, or whatever it is. I'm imagining Robin Hood right now for some reason, but just to go through life, prepared for adventure with some skills and tools, and
Yeah.
make the best of it, and then get reincarnated and do it all over again. Hopefully not exactly the same thing, but yeah, it's an eternal adventure. That's what it seems like.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And there are limitless resources and limitless ways that things can come about. Like that voice on the telephone that told me about a dance therapist. A dance therapist. I didn't know there was such a thing, but that's what I've been wondering about.
That
You
is
know, I
just
mean, I
awesome.
mean, who was that woman, and
Yeah.
why? Who gave her my telephone number, my name, and my telephone number? I mean, why? Because who was it that even knew that I was doing movement classes and was really particularly wondering about the therapeutic value of it, knowing that there was that value, but wondering how this could be used even more effectively.
I guess your invisible team was listening in pretty well.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So that is just a wonderful thing. And
Mm-hmm.
the timing of things, just that why did that UFO fly over when I was just pointing up to people looking at UFOs?
Yeah.
Not,
Validation. But like,
yeah,
what do you think it is? Like, I just made a little joke about your invisible team listening in, but I mean, do you think it's your invisible team that's causing these things to happen? Do you think that you're causing them to happen? Do you think that you prearranged for them to happen? What do you think is going on if you were going to theorize?
I would think that it's more that we are so much more connected to other people and to everything than we can even begin to imagine.
Okay. Yeah.
I think that it's more, and I could be totally wrong here, but I think it's more that we are connected to everything. In fact, everything in the universe. And it's way back in the late 1970s, I went to a lecture by Fritjof Capra. He was a very well known physicist, particularly at that time, hopefully since. And he was talking about physics, which I had not been interested in before that, the least bit,
Mm-hmm.
but I became very interested in it with his speaking. And I went up to him after the lecture and I said, how would you be able to explain that a person here in California could send messages or send healing without any physical apparatus uh, to a person in New York across the country? And he said, oh, it's a matter of physics that your thought or your energy has particles which connect to particle all the way across the country and affect that person.
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter of physics.
And so, does that mean that you happen to ask him if then intention is an intrinsic part of physics? Because how does the particle know where to go? How does it
Yeah.
know?
Well,
Yeah.
I didn't ask him that, but later on in hearing about intention. I remembered what Fritzoff Capra had said. In other words, we are not just separate over here from that person in New York,
Right.
or that person on Pluto, or the next galaxy over. You know, we think we are,
Mm-hmm.
but because of energy and physics, we are connected with everything.
Yes. And I mean, of course, all the, all the people that we look up to are saying that space and time are really quite irrelevant, essentially, in terms of the universe. It is a construct and all of that.
Yes,
So that
yes,
would make sense. I mean, in our mind, the person might be in New York, ages and ages, hours away, miles away, but really they're not really that far away. So I kind of understand what you're saying, like the non-local quality of it, right?
right. And I know that um, extraterrestrial beings out there, from our point of view, at enormous distances away,
Mm-hmm.
that they know that all that remote distance, they know so much about us, so much more than we know about them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one extraterrestrial being whom I used to talk to through somebody's channeling, um, he knew a very small detail of something that I had been experiencing in a crop circle one of those summers. And he described it to me, and described my excitement at finding this detail of the spun wheat in that particular crop circle. And they talked about the friends and what we were saying about it, and the curiosity, the excitement we had. And I said, it sounds like you were right there. Were you there somehow? And he said, no, 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 I've never left. I've never left my planet. I just see these things remotely.
Right. So do you feel like that's remote viewing, the same way that we would think of remote viewing?
It may not be exactly the same method or technique, but I think it must be akin to our remote viewing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then of course, our remote viewers must, I should think, have that sense of being connected to everything. Again, that non local consciousness,
Yes.
that they can tap into that wherever that is, even in another universe, another dimension, another galaxy.
Yeah.
And so it kind of shows that everything is connected, everything is one. And I think that the synchronicities fall into that kind of broad understanding.
It makes sense to me. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense to me. I mean, I think about so many different, I'm making a lot of connections while I'm listening to you talk about this. For example, I'm reading, I wish I had it close to me, but I don't. Just earlier today, I had it close to me. Lynn Buchanan's book, The Seventh Sense, about remote viewing.
Oh, good. Yeah.
It's a terrific read. It's packed full of information. But one of the things that he talks about that I particularly like, or it gets me feeling inspired about remote viewing, is that one of the techniques is how they word things. So you always have someone who is, I can't remember what they're called, but a person who's basically sitting with the remote viewer to assist them and support them and give them little directions and help them with their process of seeing what they're seeing and discovering what needs to be
The
discovered.
monitor, set the monitor.
Yes, thank you. The monitor. Thank
Yeah.
you. That's it. Yes. And so the monitor will say, and what are you seeing now? And where are you now? And what do you feel now? So it's always speaking in the present, even if they've asked someone to go back in time and
Yeah.
that person is in 1999, the person is saying, okay, I'm in 1999, I'm in the assigned location. And the monitor will still say, and what are you seeing now? Even though it's not 1999 right now, it's 2023.
Right.
So that aspect of it I find fascinating, because that tells me or suggests to me that it's about that idea we've all heard so many times from, again, the wise ones who seem to understand things more than we do in terms of time and space, that the only thing that is ever real is the present moment. And then, of course, the present moment is also everything. And
Yeah.
so, right. And so it's that idea of all of us being individuals, yet also being one, and all being connected all the time in every moment.
Yes. Yes. Oh, great. What a nice contribution that is that you are making to this. And when I do a regression, I do everything possible to have the person relive it.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, they may go back to a past life that's been in the year 10,056 and or 550 BC. It doesn't matter where
Mm-hmm.
or when.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in the regression, if it's a past life regression, I want them to have the sense that they are there now.
Right. I
The
remember this.
experience is happening now. And I do that with the people for extraterrestrial regressions as well. That, go back to that night you want to know about when you were 4 years old, as an example. And you are the 4-year-old, you are lying in bed, and tell me what you are first aware of, just the very beginning of being aware of something. And then if they start saying, well, then I say, no, be there now. Now I am
Right.
never, because I think that it allows so much more detail to come out if the person is having the sense
Mm-hmm.
of reliving it rather than looking back on it.
Mm-hmm. I totally understand why that would feel appropriate. I mean, it's also just validation to me, the fact that you use that technique and that it works effectively. To me,
Yes.
is validation that, the consciousness really is non-local, because how
Yeah.
else could it be that effective? How else could they feel like they were really there at that time that you're leading them through the experience? They're back there, they're present again in that moment, and describe it with the detail that you can only do when you're there in a moment in real time. To me, that's validation of non-local consciousness. It's not proof, of course, but it just makes sense given what we understand about how consciousness really does work and how it's able to move freely, around in space and time. And it does not exist as the brain. It is something else
Right.
entirely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're tapping into that in certain kinds of experiences like regression and remote viewing. And then we're connected with that probably all the time and just don't even realize it because our focus is so much smaller,
Yes.
narrow. We're just aware of everything around us and what we have to do and our plans, what our calendar says, and you know, and we don't think of I think, at least I don't, go around every day just thinking of the incredible vastness that I'm one tiny part of.
Mm-hmm.
But when I do think about it, I really feel that. I get a sense of it. Yeah. But I think most of us don't go around day after day thinking about that sort of thing.
No, we're
And
too
yet we are,
distracted.
and yet we are connected anyway, more than we realize.
Yes, it's that powerful. It's that powerful. And I always find that reassuring, that there's still these really incredible moments of connection, either between, as you've been talking about during this past hour, right? Either between the individual and the universe, or the individual team, or the guides, or whatever you want to call it. But that kind of sense of, yes, there's something bigger that's helping me in life, you know,
Yes.
or it's between people. And that is also so incredibly meaningful, real human connection. And I think that you're providing that with these talks, by the way, Barbara, because by sharing your life experiences and your stories that are directly from you, from your own lived experience, over all these years of trying such incredible techniques and practices and bringing them all together in the way that you have. It is really validating, I think, for a lot of people, you know, and you speak beautifully about these topics. So,
well, thank you. I think the whole point in doing this, giving these talks, is to validate for other people who've had their own kinds of things of these natures that have gone on, and validate them, and maybe stimulate them to think of instances in their lives too when these unusual things have happened, or in this case when certain things have just come together so wonderfully for them too. And we could call those synchronicities, but I think synchronicities have a lot more meaning to them than we can possibly even be aware.
agreed.
So,
Agreed.
so pay attention to the synchronicities that happen in your life. You see that there's invisible connections going on that we don't usually have awareness of. But we have the opportunity to at least wonder about it when a nice synchronicity happens and it means something to us.
Yes, that's terrific advice, Barbara. Thank you. I mean,
Yeah.
I need reminders of that as well too, right? To be present, to be aware, to watch and listen in a different way, to be open to things that take us to a deeper place in life. It really is very satisfying. So on those last words and that great advice you just gave, let's wrap up this topic for tonight. We're going to be doing another one soon. So Barbara School number 10 will be rolling out, and we're going to keep them coming. So everyone who's coming here to listen to Barbara's stories and her life experiences, thank you so much. And you'll find below, as usual, the links to Barbara's website where you can book a session with her if you want to. She's very responsive and absolutely amazing at what she does. And also her books and her materials if you'd like to read about her life and her experiences and all of her professional experience with people who she's done regressions for many years. So Barbara, thank you so much for being here to talk to us.
You're
And
welcome, Sinead, and thank you.
oh, I'm happy to be here. You know, I am. It's a great experience to be doing this with you. So I'm very appreciative as well that people are coming to listen, and also for all the comments that people are writing. They're really excited that you're doing this and that you're talking about your personal experience, right? Who you are behind all of the amazing work that you've done. So I'm so satisfied to be part of it. It's really a wonderful experience.
Good. Many blessings.
And to you as well.
You and to you all.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us. Bye for now.